This is a S4, I'm sorry, S5 turbine housing that we went ahead and milled out, and it shows it in one of the previous videos, and you can see the
part 4 to be exact.
You can see the big turbine inside the modified S4 turbine housing, and it fits in there really nice. Take advantage of the high flow of the whole set wheel perfectly inside the S4 housing, and it's going to basically double the output of the turbocharger, still using a very compact S4 turbine housing. And I wish I had the manifold here, but we'll go to the Miata to show you with the factory S5 manifold. It's a very tidy package. On the other side, the compressor is quite large. In fact, this is the compressor housing, and this compressor here comes in HX35 and the HX40, and the 35 will sustain well over 400 horse on a rotary engine. The HX40 will sustain close to 600 and way up in the upper fives. And it's a very small, tidy package, and you know, these turbos are available all over the place, relatively inexpensive, and they're fantastic turbochargers. They're made for Cummins diesels, and they're designed to go a million miles. Inconel shaft, Inconel turbine wheel, which is actually a work of art. It's just, you know, it fits inside the S5 turbine housing like if it was made for it. You could also put it in an S4 and take advantage of the twin scroll setup, which I intend to do that project on the on our RX-8 project, to have a massive amount of bottom end, so it'll have low and high just like the S4 Turbo 2 was designed to do.
So this one's going to have more top end power? Or?
Well, it's slightly different. The S5 manifold has both. It's like a twin scroll. The manifold is divided, so it hits the turbine wheel by pulses. Boom, 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 boom. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Theoretically, it gives you a quicker spool if it versus an open plenum. But the way the Mazda designed it with the S5, with the S4, I get confused all the time. I had a manifold on here. I guess we put it away. The S4 manifold has a, it's actually, we have it here. We have it here on the RX-8 project. Has this valve, which basically has a swing valve that opens and closes. It's become known in the industry as a quick spool valve. Well, Mazda did that back in 1987. In about 2004, 2005, people started copying this idea to block off part of the turbine wheel. Essentially, when the valve is closed, it blocks off the exducer part of the turbine wheel, and all the gases are forced to hit the inducer.
What's the difference in the inducer, exducer?
The inducer is where the exhaust gases enters the volute of the turbine housing, and the turbine housing, it's like a snail. It comes in wide and it gets narrow. As it gets narrow, it pushes on the turbine wheel and then causes it to spin. All that gas must be allowed to leave, and then it leaves through this part, and this small end of the turbine wheel is called the exducer because it's expelling the gases.
So that little valve stops it from
exactly
expelling.
that little valve closes this part of the turbine wheel and forces all of the exhaust to go into the inducer, which has a longer lever, if for a lack of a better word, from the shaft to the edge of the turbine wheel. It's longer on the inducer than it is on the exducer. So it has, having more leverage, it has more power to spin it. That's the whole idea. That's why now they call it a quick spool valve. Same thing. It's made by a very solid, famous company on the internet called Sound Performance. They make all sorts of exhaust. They mainly work on Supras, but they do a bunch of other cars, Nissan GTRs and stuff like that. But they specialize mainly in exhaust systems, and they came up with that valve. Mazda did it 12, 15 years earlier. And basically that's what it does. It forces all the exhaust to hit the inducer, causing the turbine wheel to spin quicker, and then when it's at full boost, it opens up the other part and then allows the full exhaust to be less restrictive. So
it can flow better at higher RPMs. Exactly. Just like you said before, with if you have a choking point anywhere along the line, a muffler.
Exactly. There's one major advantage to the whole set wheel when you have a priority control valve, which is the design of the exducer. On the whole set wheel, in this particular wheel, the exducer has straight blades here, just like the Hitachi HT28, which was the turbo that came on the second generation RX-7, the S4. That causes that is more of a paddle wheel than a convex vane, and it causes the turbocharger to come up the spool much quicker. At the same time, it also doesn't have, it's not as aerodynamic, so this type of blade is more for the top end, whereas the flat paddle blade is more for quick spool. Again, we're dealing with compromises here, constant compromises. You want a race car, you want a street car, you want a badass street car. Somewhere along the line, you must make a decision. Is this going to be a street car, or is this going to be a weekend toy? You know, there's ways of bridging that gap, but at some point in the search for power, at some point the cars now become more race cars or more toys than daily drivers. So it's a matter of knowing where you want to be. Regardless, you know, we can build, you know, 500-600 horsepower engines that are daily drivers. Can the car take that? Can the suspension take that? Highly unlikely. But that's a topic for a different day.
The Miata you have over here, though, is well built as far as suspension and everything, right?
This Miata basically has a complete third generation drivetrain in it, an REW motor, REW transmission, 5-speed, and differential. Everything fits in there beautifully, but the actual engine bay is substantially smaller than the RX-8, and that's the purpose of bringing this up, is to show you how neat this package actually is. In regard to respects to being packaged very small. This is a third gen motor. The frame rails on an RX-8 are about 4 inches wider than a Miata, so you have a hell of a lot more room. But the motor fits fine, plenty of room on the right side for the power steering and air conditioner. On the left side, I got it backwards, on the right side. With this package, the turbocharger, and this is a very, very large compressor housing. The turbocharger sits in there nicely, very compact, doesn't interfere with the intake manifold in any way, and it's a very cheap alternative to putting together a very nice turbo system that's going to, you know, more than satisfy the power demands of 90% of the street guys. There's a YouTube video of this little car, this little Miata, racing a twin turbo Viper when County Line was open at 1/8 mile, and he put like 5 cars on them. So you know, it's all a matter of part or weight ratio, but again, it's just a very, very, very tidy way of setting it up, a real nice turbo system. Plenty of room between the compressor housing and the intake manifold, and you know, by sheer luck, this Miata had a on the chassis, a little bump right here, which just perfectly made it up to the compressor housing.
Somebody was thinking ahead, huh?
Exactly. I'm sure these engineers think about all this stuff that they could do, yet the accountants don't let them do it.
That and the liability of having a 500 horsepower.
Exactly.
Miata, right?
So you can go out and find yourself an S4 or an S5 exhaust manifold and turbine housing, turbocharger that's damaged. Pick it up for peanuts. Clean it real well, sandblast it, clean it, drop it on a hydrosonic, take all the carbon out of the turbine housing, and bore it, drop in an HX35 or an HX40, and you have yourself a badass turbo system for a streetable, even weekend warrior rotary car. And these turbos will take more punishment than 99% of anything that is out there. Again, they're designed for diesel engines. They have Inconel shaft and wheel. And, believe it or not, all these real high-tech turbos that they have nowadays with ball bearings, except for the Borg-Warner EFRs, most of them are very delicate. And they crap out when they're exposed for a long period of time to the exhaust temperature of a rotary engine. So I really like the whole sets. And the fact that they're cheap makes them even nicer.
Are you going to be putting together a kit for the Miata as well at some point?
Well, actually, I had started since the third gen RX-7s are drying out. I had started the whole idea about starting to build Miatas, and then we got sidetracked and we got involved with the RX-8 project, and that required a little more attention, and it actually kind of fed my brain to do something well done that nobody had done before, and be able to integrate all because the RX-8 is fantastic car. It's just that the engine is less than desirable. So that got my juices going to design a system that would integrate the third gen motor, which is considered to be the best, most power making of all the rotary engines to date, along with all the creature features and all the neat stuff that the RX-8 has. So making a combination of bringing both engines together, creating a hybrid, and dropping it in the car, so you would have a really nice driving car with some balls to it, some power. So we put the Miata project on the side burner until we get the RX-8 stuff done. But I just wanted to, since we've had so many inquiries about boring the turbine housing and dropping in bigger cartridges, I just wanted to show you guys what can be done and how well it fits. I wish I had the manifold off the engine to show you how it goes together, but anybody can, visualize bolting a turbine wheel to an exhaust manifold. That's all there is to it. But the fitment, how it actually fits and comes together, it's like tailor-made.
What about like later generation Miatas? This looks like an early first gen model, right?
Well, they're all pretty much the same except the third generation of the, not the brand new one, but up to 2014. That car was substantially more advanced and different than the first gen and second gen. They have a designation to them, I forget what they are. But just like the RX-7s had first, second, and third gen, the Miatas have had first, second, and third generations. I believe the second generation started at about 2005 or 6 or something like that. That's the one where the headlights don't go up and down, but they actually have those little teardrop headlights. But the chassis is essentially the same, very minor changes. And then they came out with the third generation Miata, which is the one that has the big bulgy fenders. That one's real pretty, and that's a totally different car. Regardless, this could be done with any of them. It's a very simple proposition. What makes this thing come together so easily is a subframe that you can purchase from a company called Flynn Miata. or Flying Miata. I don't know how they pronounce it, but anyway, it's a subframe that they made for the for putting V8s.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen this.
And it's very well made. You basically drop the subframe from the Miata, put the Flynn Miata on, and hang the suspension on it, and you're done. And as far as a rotary engine goes, it is so big and wide on the bottom that it drops in there beautifully. All we have to do is weld 2 little tabs to mount since the 3rd generation block mounts to the chassis on the rear housing, and the engine sort of floats on the pivots between the transmission and the weight of the front. Basically all we did was weld some little brackets and let it sit there using the original mounting points of the REW engine. I'll raise it up and show you right now. This is the actual subframe. Let me get a flashlight. This is the actual subframe that's sold by Flynn or Flying. It bolts onto the chassis on the top. You hang the suspension from the Miata off of it. Just like they have subframes to mount the 20Bs onto 3rd generation RX-7s made by different companies. The difference is that when they made those chassis, they actually moved the rack, and that really messed up the bump steer and the whole geometry of the 3rd generation RX-7. These guys went about it the right way. All the suspension points are exactly as they were designed by Mazda, so the handling on these cars is just fabulous.
What's it like to drive this car? I know you've driven it before.
Oh, I have made a career of building and driving some really fast cars, race cars, anything you can imagine that's fast. And I honestly have to say that of all the cars I have ever driven, this little Miata with this engine package, which only made 360 horsepower, or rather tuned to 360 horsepower, was the most fun I've ever had in any car. You could throw her around like you could make it do whatever you want.
A go-kart.
Yeah, I mean, and the beauty about these older Miatas is that, actually for any of the Miatas, they're so underpowered from factory that even if you buy a really old one, unless the car's been crashed, all of the, your suspension, the gearbox, everything is going to be in excellent shape. As far as getting a car, most cars, with some power, the suspension wears out, the bushings, U-joints, spherical bearings, whatever, tie rods, all that crap wears out. These Miatas are so slow when they're stock that, you get a 92, 94, and it's still solid, very solid, and the handling is just fantastic. This is, like I said, this is the subframe right here. It was made for V8s, and all this area is hollow, and all we did was weld 2 little ears and bolt it onto the 3rd gen mounting points. Right now I have some pieces of wood here because I've decided to go ahead and raise the whole drivetrain up a little bit more to put power steering and air conditioning. Before, when the car was first built, it had no AC and no power steering, but I'm doing it right now because this is going to be another how can I say it, showcase car for CLR Motorsports.
What about maintaining the car's functions on, let's say, later generation Miatas like you're trying to do on the RX-8? Is that possible using a piggyback computer? Do you know?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. For one thing, these cars are very Spartan. They're highly old school. They're like your first generation RX-7s. Everything was mechanical. These Miatas are the same way. Even the second generation Miatas. I'm not too familiar with the third gen, the ones that have the big fenders. That car I don't know anything about. But your first and second gen Miatas were basically mechanical cars, like old school cars, what they call a pure
driver's car.
Driver's car.
Yeah.
So when you do something like this, you basically get rid of the factory ECU and you put an aftermarket computer. This car has a Microtech, which is about the most basic of all standard ECUs, I mean standalone ECUs that you can put on. And it runs it absolutely beautiful. I mean, the Microtech is an excellent race car ECU, but it has leaves a lot to be desired as a daily driver ECU. Street ECU has no idle control. It has only one output for controlling the fans or whatever. So it's just very basic. I mean, they have more advanced models than what this car has, but you don't need it. And this car basically is just, you know, like an old Triumph or an old TR6 or an old.
Well, that's what
Corvette.
Mazda was going for when they created this Roadster. It was one of the most successfully selling cars in their history.
Exactly. So
a reliable Japanese-made,
fully mechanical. Put your drivetrain in there. You put your computer to drive the engine alone, and
you don't need all the traction control and dynamic stability control and taken away from the fun.
Fact, when we did this car, which this was totally unnecessary, we actually put a third generation rear pumpkin, whereas you could save yourself a lot of headaches by taking the rear, the complete rear end from an S4 or an S5 RX-7, second generation RX-7, and bolt it right up to the chassis. Done deal. Axles go in place. It's like if it was made for it. Only problem, and this is the reason why we chose to go with the third gen differential, is that with the second gen RX-7, it has a much longer pinion shaft, so you don't have any real choices of ring and pinion. You basically have your 411, your 390 for your automatics, and if you decide to put a racing ring and pinion, they're extremely, I mean absolutely extremely inexpensive, and they're based on the non-turbo ring gear. So as far as ring and pinion setups for the second gen RX-7, you got a 390, a 411, and a 437 for miles of speed. That's it. With the third gen RX-8 diff, you have 390, 411, 437, 444 of the RX-8, 477 of the later RX-8, and then you've got your racing ring and pinions. You got a 512 and a 533, I believe. So
RX-8 rear would fit in here?
The RX-8 differential and the RX-7 third generation differential are exactly the same pumpkin, same unit.
It's interesting. And this car has what else on it? Fuel cell, suspension,
this
shocks.
car's got fuel cell, good Japanese spec, coilover shocks, racing beat, front and rear stabilizer bars, all the really nice stuff. Like I said, it was just lacking air conditioning and power steering, and now we're adding that to it. And I had a lot of fun driving this thing. I mean, I could keep it going sideways for the full length of a block.
Have you seen Mad Mike's four-rotor Miata
that
he's drifting now?
That thing is crazy. Can you imagine that? That has 4 times the power. Just
yeah, I've seen him smoke the whole course when they were in.
But let me tell you, man, I've driven a lot of fast cars in my life. Everything from Italian exotics to home-built shoeboxes with big motors. I used to be into big V8s long before I got associated with rotaries. And this car was just the most fun I ever had in a little street car that you could just beat on and just enjoy it.
You do have the four-rotor twin turbo right there behind you. You could make this into the Mad Mike competition.
We could, but that's already got another project. You know.
I know. I'm just kidding.
I wish we had more time. Actually, I wish we had the manpower to be able to get all these projects going quicker than I can actually do it. But we're doing our best, and we don't cut corners. So we'll get to it all. This is going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Thanks. Fuel cell. Some drag slicks. Guess you need them with that motor.